Thank you everyone for joining us again. My name is Simone and I'm an outreach coordinator at GreenThumb. And we are heading into our next set of workshops for our Grow Together conference. So we appreciate everyone who's here. It's been a long week of us having lots of workshops, lots of conversations, and we're very happy to continue that conversation with our workshops, Lessons for the Season from Medicine Wheels around the world. So today our workshop will be led by the lovely Nicole Namagut. Nicole is an herbalist, an artist, and educator based in New York City. She is the creator of Ballast Botanics, an herbal line inspired by Ballast flora and informed by both her Puerto Rican and European ancestry. Nicole studied herbalism with Karen Rose at Sacred Vibes Apothecary and is currently studying acupuncture and Chinese medicine at Pacific College of Health and Science in New York. So I will pass it on to Nicole to begin.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to our hosts and to our interpreters. Yeah, I'm just really excited. This is a workshop that I've been thinking about for a while, and I think probably like many people need a deadline to get it going. And then also thank you especially to the land that we're on and to the plants that are here hanging out with us. So I'm gonna share my screen. Where'd it go? Okay. And I have, switch over to presents. Okay. So I have, and I shared with our hosts a link to the PowerPoint that folks can look at. So as long as you have the link, you can view it. And then there's also an accompanying handout, which is about 8 pages of information that goes into a little bit more detail and is something that you can refer back to and has resources on it. And again, that's a Google Doc that if you have the link, you're able to view it. So Simone, I don't know if we can share that with folks now. So if they want to follow along both on, I mean, I'll have my screen sharing, but if you want to follow along at your pace or have access to the handout as we're working, I think that would be helpful. And then of course, refer to it later as well. All right. Cool. So, oh wait, there we go. All right, so here's our plan. Thank you for the wonderful introduction to my work and what I've been up to. Most of my work right now is dominated by being a student, just coming out of midterms week. So I'm really excited to poke my head out of books to be here with you all. We're gonna talk a little bit about what a season is, a little bit about medicine wheels broadly as a concept. And then we're going to break out into small groups to look at the 4 examples. So in your groups, you'll be able to talk about one wheel in particular and kind of notice what stands out to you about that wheel. And then we're going to do a medicine making demonstration of vinegars, herbal vinegars, which is beautiful spring medicine. And then we'll close out with some reflections on spring and springtime, since we're, well, depending on which wheel you're thinking about. We're either already there or coming up on it. So we'll see. Okay. That is the introduction that you've seen. And this is me with a bunch of dandelion leaves. So my goal, I mean, we have together about 40 minutes really of content. And so we're not going to get like deep into all of these, but my hope is that we can kind of do an overview of what is this concept, how we can think about living seasonally, particularly when we're living in a culture that does this weird thing with seasons where everything's available all the time. So there are no seasons, right? We can eat strawberries in December. We can, have we're working in air conditioning all summer long, right? So seasons are like, what even is that? But then we also have all these made up seasons, like back to school season or Black Friday season, which are based around like a retail calendar. So, you know, I think our current culture has created kind of a bizarre relationship to time and to ritual and to cycle. And so hopefully my goal here is to introduce us to another way of relating to time and another way of relating to cycles. So I chose 4 examples. We're going to look at the Ojibwe medicine wheel, the Celtic wheel of the year, the Dagara cosmological wheel, and the Chinese 4 seasons. I was trying to go for like geographic breadth. In none of these are we really going to be in depth, but really kind of like thinking about what's the structure, what's the architecture, and how does the land and environment itself inform this technology of a medicine wheel. So most of this learning I've done certainly through my study with Karen, through my study of Chinese medicine. I'm not initiated into any of these practices. Like, you're not going to be an expert after this, but my hope is that we can think a little bit about cycles and reintroduce cycles. And I think as gardeners, that's something that you know, you all have already in a way that maybe people that aren't interacting with dirt so much, that's not part of their everyday life or everyday rhythm. What even is a season? So seasons, we think about them. Oh no,
it's okay.
There's all this space stuff here and not my actual information. So ignore the planets, and I'll just talk through this, sorry. So seasons represent our relationship to time, right? They often are determined by our relationship to the sun and our rotation around the sun. In the Northeast, where I think most people are, we have these kind of 4 seasons that are pretty distinct, but those are not the only way to interact with seasons, right? Other places with different geographies will have like rainy and dry seasons. We'll have seasons based on fruit. In very north and very southern climates, you'll have seasons based on sunlight, right? A dark part of the year and a light part of the year, which we'll see in one of our examples. So seasons let us know what resources we have available to us, the temperature, the weather, what we can grow, and they organize our activities. And so one of the things I mentioned earlier was like in our present day, we do pretty much the same thing all the time, right? Like if you have a job that you show up for, you're going to go to work like in December, the same that you go to work in June, right? With maybe, you know, some educators in a school system having like a major exception to that. But for most folks, that's what we're doing. And that hasn't been the case for most of history in most of the world, right? This idea that we're doing everything at the same time is really a product of indoor climate control and capitalism. So the other thing I'll say about seasons is that they open up opportunities for us to do things. One of the, you know, in a gardening sense, like planting, what can we plant? What can we harvest? What can we trade? When can we trade it? But a lot of these seasons would also mark times for entering into contracts, entering into marriages, having courtship rituals. And so opportunities that were not tied necessarily to like harvest were also linked with seasons. So I'm going to pose this to you all. What do you do right now, right, to mark the change of seasons? Do any of you, and you can pop it in the chat, have a special activity or ritual that lets you know that the season is shifting? Do your daily activities change? Do you even just feel like a different kind of energy with the seasons? So I'll invite you to put that into the chat. So it is the start of seed starting season. Yes, I just figured that one out and just got a bunch of seeds. Time to clean house, to smudge, to walk in the park and look at different plants. cleaning, organization. Ice skating in the rain this morning. Looking at the trees in the summer. Yes, I have a tree right outside my window that I use for marking time a lot. Yeah, some of us are really sensitive. I feel very sensitive to changing seasons. Yes, for spring, and yes, for spring cleaning. Right? That energy can affect us in different ways. Bulbs, breakfast, clean up, mop floors. From gardeners, 2 seasons, planting and harvesting and waiting for planting and harvesting. More daylight. Awesome. Just surviving, getting ready for spring and summer events, noticing the change in light. Yeah, so thank you for that. I think it's a helpful reminder that even though many of us are like disconnected from seasonal rhythms, like they still are a part of our life. And we still do honor them and have ways of marking those times. Thank you. All right. So I have a lot of windows here. All right, so I want to introduce a little bit about the concept of a medicine wheel. And the very first thing I'm going to say about a medicine wheel is that the name medicine wheel is a European invention imposed on Native American ways of marking their own seasons and time in a circle divided into quadrants. And so that's just something that we should foreground. And so we're using that language because I think it's recognizable. I think people, you know, hopefully you're here because you heard that term, know what it is, and it interested you. But just want to complicate that legacy a little bit. That the name wheel itself is something that's an imposition. And so I think when we're working in translation and when we're working through traumas of colonialism, like that's important to keep in mind, right? That we're never ever able to kind of like reach back into like an untouched concept or unharmed concept of what these are. That said, it's a useful tool because it does mean something in our culture. And so we're going to refer to it. So the first thing I want to do is introduce this idea of an indigenous technology. Malidoma Somé, whose book we had to read for Karen's apprenticeship, and is the one who writes really beautiful about the Dagara cosmological wheel, excuse me. Talks about indigenous technologies as tools to facilitate a relationship between human communities and the natural world around us, and that they're often low machinery. And it's interesting, he doesn't use the language of low technology because they are a technology in and of themselves, but they're low machinery. And so we often tend to dismiss a really valuable technology as a superstition or as backwards or as a remnant of something, but it's a really deeply valuable tool, which maybe like brings us to our next point of within these representations, there's so much knowledge that's embedded. We can look at it and just think, okay, here's a calendar, but within that, there's information about what plants are available, what rituals to participate in. In the case of, you know, I know this most because that's what I'm studying, but I would venture to say that this is true of all the medicine wheels that we'll be looking at, is they correspond to different parts of the body, to different diseases or different disharmonies that can happen in the body, and also to like the much wider cosmos. And so something that looks like this really simple circle that's divided into like pie pieces really has so much information, and as parts of those communities and as people are further initiated into those communities, that knowledge is available and accessible. And so for us, we're really today just looking at the surface of that. But if these are things that resonate with you or that are part of your own ancestry or encourage you to look at the wheels of your own ancestry, there's so much knowledge that's there and embedded. So all of these are land-based, right? Like everybody comes from a place, comes from the land. And I think one of the things that we'll see and notice is that the land informs every aspect of these. So from what wheels, what phases or seasons or elements are even present, to colors that are used, to activities, to plants. So those are all part of it, right? These don't come from nowhere. They come from a specific geographic space on the earth. And then, like we mentioned before, they tell us what's going on, right? So not just like what's going on with the weather and what's going on with the stars and what's going on with the light. They're organizing our activities, right? Do we start planting seeds? Do we start entering contracts? Do we start courting? Do we start cleaning and getting haircuts, as we just saw for our Lunar New Year? So those are also part of that. And then I'll say, like, certainly not every culture has a concept of a wheel, but every land-based culture, right? Every culture has a way to mark time and to mark ceremony. Oh no, what did I do? Nope. Sorry. Okay. So I'm just going to really briefly kind of highlight and show you these, but really you're going to have a chance in small groups to talk about what you're noticing and what you're seeing in more depth. So this is a representation of the Ojibwe medicine wheel. We'll see it oriented around the 4 directions of north, south, east, and west, with this idea of balance and earth in the center. And so part of what I want to highlight here, at least, is the stages of life and the energy that each one of these times have, right? So in the east, where we have the sun coming up, we have like youth and infancy. As we get to the south and the hotter part of the year, we have adolescence and young adulthood. In the fall, we see adulthood and coming into being full standing members in a community. And then in the north, we have the winter, and some talk about elders here and some talk about ancestors here. So looking at how each one of these seasons not only represents what's going on with the earth itself, but what's going on in our own lives, right? And how our own lives kind of fit into this cycle. And then I will say, in terms of gardening, one of the really exciting parts of my apprenticeship was getting to work on the medicine wheel garden with Karen. And so we actually planted a garden in this shape, oriented in these directions with different corresponding plants. So if that's something that's exciting and that resonates with your ancestry, that's something that exists and is exciting. This is the Dagara Wheel, and so here we're seeing different elements. We see mineral, we see water, fire, nature. I'm excited to see nature and mineral here. And so these not only represent similar stages of life, but also kinds of people that contribute to a society. Talking about water people on reconciliation, harmony. Nature people have a role, fire people have a role, earth and mineral people each have a distinct role. And something that stands out to me here is that these are not equal. In his book, Malidoma Somé talks about how we need 3 water people for every fire person to have balance, which I think is a really interesting concept, right? That equal doesn't always mean like this even staticness, but actually like to have balance, we might have different amounts of something. The Celtic Wheel of the Year is often oriented around light and dark, right? When we think about Ireland and Scotland, right? They're very, very far north. And so the year's divided into light and dark, light beginning with spring, dark beginning in the fall. And the quarter days are happening on the equinoxes and the solstices. So moments where we have light, longest dark, longest light, and then even. And then there are cross quarter days, which sort of mark the halfway point of those seasons. And they often are like the transitional moments. And then finally, with the 5 elements, which are sometimes called phases or seasons, they also each represent an element, some of them different elements than what we've seen. And this representation highlights how they build on each other, but also how they keep each other in check, which is something that I find, you know, interesting. And then as a student of Chinese medicine, something that we use both diagnostically and as a treatment tool and treatment strategy. So I will give you all a chance to jump in here. So our amazing tech wizards have set it up that you all can select your groups. So we have discussion questions. We're going to broadcast these to you so you have them in your groups. Please don't feel like you need to answer all of them, but maybe choose one that's exciting for your group or just see where it goes. And then depending on time, we'll see how our report backs can go. But ideally, I'd like to just have like 1 or 2 highlights, not a full-on report back, but just like what's one thing that stood out from your discussion. Yeah, so I hope that was a little bit helpful for everyone. This was my first time working with choose your own breakout groups, and I think that the same for other folks. So thank you all for your patience and grace and understanding with with Zoom. So if there's any observations that people made or just anything that folks want to share, folks want to share from their conversations. Yeah, so things to folks who are making connections to their lives, to things that are already going on. And I'm sorry to folks who got kind of cut off or weren't able to jump into that. The Slack is definitely a place to continue that conversation. Yeah. But thank you for your patience, and I'm sorry that didn't work out the way we had imagined. All right, so let me read a couple of these out loud so we can hear it. All right, so we talked about how to find out what element we are on the Dagara Wheel. Yes, there's some great websites available to that, and in the book by Malidoma Somé. White is snow, making a connection to snow on the ground. The interweaving of self-knowledge and relationship to nature, right? Of understanding that we're not actually separate from nature. Thinking about the 5 elements and learning more. Yeah, absolutely. When you are maybe born, the time of the year ties you to the seasons and the medicine wheel, right? We see that even in Western astrology. That the month that we're born ties us to a particular energy and way of being. Some is new, all interesting, thank you. Curious to learn more, but would like an expert to explain it, absolutely. And so hopefully this is an invitation to seek out those experts, to dive deeper into that information. Websites for the Dagara Wheel. I can. And I found them myself by just a Google search of Dagara Cosmology Wheel, and several different organizations have writings about that, break down Malidoma Somé's book in a little bit more depth, and have, yeah, thank you, Mara, and have information about that. All right. So we're gonna make a little bit of medicine. Oh, we had a question about the book. So this is one of the books, The Healing Wisdom of Africa. And then he has another book, which I'm forgetting the name, but also talks about the medicine wheel. But this is the book in particular that I was referencing. Yes, the Wang Dine Jing, the Yellow Emperor's Classic, absolutely breaks it down. That's something that you truly may want an expert. But that's beautiful, because that's like the source material that so much of Chinese medicine is drawn from. So that's really, really going to the source. Okay, so we're gonna be making a vinegar, and I'm gonna adjust. Oh, Mara, I had just a question. What time do you want me to stop making medicine?
I would love to start doing questions at 2:50 if possible. So you have 8 minutes to make vinegar. Is that all right?
That's perfect. And in fact, while I'm working, if folks want to ask some stuff, we can do that.
Yeah, great. Everyone put your questions in the chat. I will keep track of them.
Okay.
Nicole, would you mind stopping the screen share so that we can see your desk in full view?
Oh, sure. Okay, so here is the stuff that we're going to be putting in. All right. So I have. How's that view? Do I need to put the? Yeah, I need to put the camera down a little bit more. Okay. We're okay.
Great. Yep.
So vinegars are really cool. Maybe you have seen kind of just I mean, to me, I feel like an explosion of tinctures and tincture making and herbal medicine making. Sorry, that's like a boob shot. So just an explosion of herbal medicine making in the world. And so I wanted to give an example of how to do that. So vinegar is sour. I'll pop down to the table in a second. Vinegar is sour. In the Chinese 5 elements, like we've seen, sour is the taste of the spring. It's astringent, it holds liquid in, and it sends herbs to our liver. And our liver is doing a lot of detox work, right? Our liver is amazing at that, right? It filters our blood, it processes hormones, awesome. So I wanted to work with a couple, so vinegar itself is a medicine, and then the herbs that we're gonna put in it are also pretty interesting. All right, so the first herb we're gonna work with is burdock. This is dried burdock. You can also get fresh burdock at like Asian grocery stores. Burdock works with our lymphatic system. It's cool. A lot of this information is also in the handout. It's cool. And helps clear out the lymphatic system. It's a vegetable, and it's a pretty common, I don't like to use the word weed, but a pretty common, often uninvited friend that we'll find in parks and gardens. So burdock is gonna be the main herb that we're gonna put in here. So the next one is fennel. Fennel is warming. It's pungent, you can smell it. And it's a little bit sweet. And this is just like fennel from the grocery store. So this is like much stronger than burdock. So we're gonna put like just a little bit less. And we're kind of just making like these layers. You can see different layers of plants. Bitters taste bitter. And we don't always like that flavor, but there's a lot of really delicious bitters as well. I think fennel tastes delicious. Burdock has its own kind of distinct earthy flavor, but also something like orange peels and orange rinds are bitter, but they're also a really like delicious taste. And citrus is certainly, use a spoon. Citrus is also associated with the spring and the liver. It spreads chi and energy. So you'll kind of notice that I'm just eyeballing these. There's a question, are you using fennel powder or seed? I'm using the whole seed. You could use powder, but when you strain it, it'll be kind of like powdery in your straining. So that, so you can get a sense of like what's the ratios. Herbs are really powerful, but the preparation that we're making is kind of like an everyday vinegar, and so we're a little bit less precise with measurements. The kind of the technique that I'm using is called the folk method, where you're measuring just in ratio to the container that you have. And then the last thing that we're going to put in is black pepper. And just a little bit of it goes a long way, and this will make our vinegar a little bit spicy. And herbal formulas, it's really nice to have something that's called like a catalyst, right? So something that's kind of like pungent and spicy that'll like kick off that reaction in the body and with the herbs itself. So because I'm using dried, because I'm using dried materials, and there are materials that are going to absorb a lot of our liquid, we're really only filling it up about halfway. So when you're making a folk medicine tincture with fresh materials, you're going to fill your jar the whole way. When you're making it with dried leaves, you're going to go about 3/4 of the way because they're going to absorb less liquid. And then here, since we're working with roots, fruit, and peels, they're going to absorb a lot. So we're only filling about halfway. We want our plant materials to move. We want them to, their constituents to get extracted into the vinegar itself. So here, I'm just covering the plant material and leaving just a little bit of room at the top because I know my plant material is going to expand. And because I'm working in, I totally lost that train of thought, sorry. Oh, because I'm working with vinegar. I'm going to want to put a piece of saran wrap, which I should have prepped out for myself. But anything that's going to cover between the vinegar and your metal lid. So you could use a wax paper, probably not parchment. I usually just use plastic wrap, but the vinegar can corrode the metal. And so we don't want that to happen. For now, I'm just going to close it so I can show you the rest, but imagine like a dainty little, like fluffy saran wrap around it. So we're going to shake it. And then once we're in there, this is shaken, all the herbs are hanging out together. We're going to make sure we label. And this is like not very exciting work, but it's really critical because I don't know if any of you are homemade medicine makers. You're probably had the experience of like, no, I know what's in here. I know what this is. And then you put it away and you're like, I have no idea what this is. So I made this label ahead of time. I like to use washi tape because it peels off easily. And so the stuff on my label, I'll read it to you. So it just says burdock vinegar, what it is. Has the date that we're making it, 02/27/2021. And I put a little like circle in here for the full moon because it's a full moon. And if that's like an energy that you're attuned into and is exciting for you to think about like how the moon cycles fit into your medicine making, that's absolutely something that you can do. And then at the bottom in kind of like bad handwriting, it has the ingredients, right? So we have burdock, fennel, orange peel, black pepper, and apple cider vinegar. And then we're gonna put our little label on our guy. And then we're gonna keep it out of the sun. It doesn't need to be in a super dark location, but I would not recommend putting it in direct sunlight. I just keep my own preparations like on a bookshelf out of the sun. Someone says painter's tape works great. Yes, it does. And then after about 2 to 4 weeks, we're going to strain it out. So if you like a little bit more vinegar flavor and less herby flavor, strain it after 2 weeks. If you want a little bit more of the herb flavor infused in it. Actually, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen so you can see what's in here. Yeah, so if you want a little bit more flavor, sorry, thank you, you can strain it after 4 weeks. And so the way that I would use this vinegar, and do use vinegars like this, you can use it as a salad dressing, just kind of as a regular part of your cooking. If you're making things like bone broth, where vinegar is going to help you extract the minerals, this is a really like exciting addition, flavorful addition to food and to cooking. If you're like excited about the world of like shrubs and bitters, shrubs are drinking vinegars. You can add it to seltzer and make kind of an exciting fizzy drink for yourself. So this is going to be really kind of earthy, a little bit sweet, and a little bit spicy in terms of the flavors that come out of it. So I put here on the screen a little bit of the properties of these herbs. Burdock, sweet, bitter, cool, and moist. Oh, we wanted questions. Okay. And I've already gone into that. So this information also in the handout. And I saw a quick question about like why vinegar in the springtime. And so vinegar itself, we can think about medicinally because it directs things to the liver. And the liver is doing a lot of really good hard work in the spring, helping us process a lot of like the warm, heavy, nourishing foods from the winter and a lot of our like sedentary activities in the winter of like our nesting. And so vinegar is going to help process that. And here we were using raw apple cider vinegar, which has the mother, which is all the like good bacteria and fermented stuff that's in it. So that's all that cloudiness at the bottom.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Yeah.
So we had a question, would plastic lids be okay, or is there expansion?
Yes, plastic lids are fine, and there will be expansion, but if you're straining it in 2 to 4 weeks, you should be fine with that. So yeah, some of the ball jars come with like special plastic lids. You can absolutely use those or stick a saran wrap underneath.
Thank you. And so there's a question about how much of this tonic are you taking at one time? Like, would you have some, and then related to that, would you have some before eating to improve digestion? If so, how much?
Yes, great questions. So I mentioned the food uses of it, and in that we're using like a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of it. One of the ways you can also use a bitter, and this is a bitters formula, is exactly however our really brilliant friend who asked the question, you can have it about 10 to 15 minutes before eating, or sometimes even after eating to help improve digestion. So the bitter flavor is going to send a signal to our liver and gallbladder to help start producing bile, and to help us digest and process our food better. Because that bile gets like shot out into our small intestine, helps break down fats in particular, and helps us absorb the nutrients from our food.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
Would fire cider be considered a cleanser for spring?
I think it could. Fire cider is a little intense. I'm like not team fire cider because it's a little spicy for me. But usually when you see what's in fire ciders, those are all things that are going to really like warm the belly, right? Those are really warming herbs. And with the vinegar, we're going to see those same things of directing medicine to our liver. And so if you have like some leftover fire cider from your winter immune preparations, absolutely, you can be drinking that in the spring. Yes, and that brings up the really important connection between our immune systems and our gut health, right? So it's absolutely like makes perfect sense to be drinking an immune tonic to help with our digestive health because so much of our immune systems are located in our GI tract.
Thank you. Related to that, could ginger be used instead of pepper since it's also warming and supports digestion?
Totally. So in the handout, I put a couple suggestions of other herbs. And if you like ginger, use ginger. So some of the ones that I mentioned in here were dandelion leaf and root, which is a beautiful spring green. I know you all had a foraging workshop this morning and kind of talked maybe about some of the limitations of foraging in the city. But if you're able to find like clean soil with dandelion, this is like a great time to dig up the leaves and roots. Orange peels we mentioned, gentian root is just a super, super bitter herb. That's a little less findable in a supermarket or like just around, but you can certainly order it. Nettle. Nettle is not a great herb for tincturing. Like it's really good stuff, comes out mostly in water, but actually vinegar is a great way to tincture and preserve nettle. And it's just super, super high in vitamins, minerals, and it grows in the spring. So that may be a suggestion. So I want to say like any bitter, any warming herb, anything that like makes you excited, like please use it, try it, experiment with it. Any of the warm spices like pumpkin pie spices, cloves, what are some of those other ones? Just cloves, nutmeg, turmeric. Not that you would put that in pie, but those are things like pretty easily accessible in the grocery store that you can be working with. The picture that I have up on the screen is a grapefruit bitters that has a lot of these same herbs, but fresh grapefruit peel and rind. So even citrus peels that are fresh. I will say, if you do that, to please, please, please make sure that your citrus peels are organic, because citrus has been designed to absorb the pesticides into its peel. That's why the fruit, right? If you get non-organic oranges, like that's cool if you're eating the fruit because it's all in the peel. But if you are using the peel for medicine making, to please, please, please use organic stuff.
That makes sense. And then last question before we move on to our next webinar. Can you also comment on adding turmeric and ginseng to vinegar?
Turmeric and ginseng. Turmeric, I would say, is a really beautiful thing to add to vinegar. It's going to be warming. It's going to function pretty similarly to ginger in this case. It has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. Ginseng is a really strong tonic. And in a lot of the traditional preparations of ginseng, it's often cooked separately. So when you see like instructions for preparing traditional Chinese herbs with ginseng, you're almost always having it prepared separately because one, it's expensive, but two, because it's so strong. So I would, if you for some reason have access to ginseng root, which is amazing, I would probably stick to preparing it in the traditional decoction and not preserving it in vinegar and not preserving it in a formula, kind of like a food grade formula like this.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to return the mic back to Simone.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. I know that we are all very excited about the information you shared. For some of us, it's a process of discovering it. For others of us, I think we want to delve deeper. And so I greatly appreciate your beautiful presentation, which you are so kindly sharing with all our participants to review and delve deeper. And for folks who are working in our Slack, you can go there to continue the conversation as well. I know there's been a lot of information we shared in a short time, so I hope this helps us to continue the conversation. And thank you to everyone here who came to our workshop. We are going to move into our second workshop for this afternoon, which actually is our final workshop, if you can believe it, of our Grow Together conference. So if you would like to stick around, you can continue on the same Zoom link in order to do that. And so our final workshop will be Finding Ancestor Reverence. So right now, yeah, go ahead, please.
That's it. Just thank you all so much for coming. And I'm really, feel really grateful to be able to share this with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.